Hi, my name is Rylind Pasquito,
And my name is Fabiola Gonzalez.
and this is our Bioblitz presentation.
So the first part, we have the identification of organisms. So first we have the vertebrates, which we did the eastern cottontail rabbit. So for the first question is, how does the organism reproduce and what are its life cycle stages? So for the reproduction, it reproduces sexually and is usually from early spring to late summer. And it can have multiple litters per year, up to 3 to 8 kits. For the life cycle, it is embryo, newborn, which is the kid, juvenile, weaned young, adult, subadult, and adult. How many chromosomes does it have, and what sex determinations do they use? So these have 42 diploid chromosomes, and they follow the typical XX-XY sex determination found in mammals. So what are their importance to humans? So the eastern cottontail rabbit contributes to maintaining plant balance and to local hunting economies and wildlife management. As for the interesting fact, these organisms can reproduce up to 7 times per year, which allows their populations to recover quickly even after hard winters or heavy predation. For the invertebrates, we also did the jumping spider. How does the organism acquire energy? The organism's main energy source are small insects, which they hunt themselves. What is an adaptation for survival in its environment? The jumping spiders have strong leg muscles that allow them to jump several times their body length in order to capture prey or to escape predators. So for their importance to humans, the jumping spiders help control insect populations, and they act as natural pest control in humans' gardens, farms, and even in their homes. And an interesting fact is that these spiders can see in color and in ultraviolet light, which help them hunt and to perform courtship dances.
Okay, next we had the flowering plants, and we did the red maple tree for this. So for how does the organism reproduce and what are its life cycle stages? Reproduction happens via seed dispersal. More specifically, fruit pods, known as samaras, fall from the tree to the ground, and this allows more seeds to settle and germinate. The life cycle is a long process and takes many years, but it begins with the samaras, which disperse onto the ground. These seeds then turn into saplings and then eventually the massive trees that we're familiar with. For its importance to humans, they have a variety of important factors to our lives. We utilize them for wood for houses and even instruments. Furthermore, the red maple tree produces sap, and the tree can be tapped to get syrup. Lastly, the red maple overall plays a huge role in allowing in keeping our ecosystems intact by providing for the organisms in our forest and outdoors. How does an organism interact with other organisms in its environment? So just like I talked about before, the red maple tree takes up large space and it has large roots and branches, and this is used by organisms like bugs, animals, like squirrels and birds, as a host or habitat. It also has a dual use of being a food source for these organisms as well. And then an interesting fact, red maple trees are known for their large size. Typically they range between 60 to 90 feet tall, but some have been known to reach more than 120 feet in height. So next we have the non-flowering plants, and for this we did the common lichens. For how does this organism reproduce and what are its life cycle stages? So it reproduces both sexually and asexually, as well as vegetative reproduction. During sexual reproduction, the genes are mixed, while in asexual reproduction they are not. And then in sexual reproduction, lichen spores will travel via the air, they'll settle somewhere, and then the lichen will grow from there. With lichens, another way of referring to the asexual reproduction is vegetative reproduction. And then for its importance to humans, they act as air purifiers by absorbing pollution, and they're also indicator of air problems. They have been used in medicine, specifically in treatments for arthritis, alopecia, kidney diseases, and more. And then they also have been used for natural dyes. And then how does the organism acquire its energy? The common lichens rely on their environments to acquire energy, specifically from the air and rainfall that occurs. The way it uses these nutrients is that it absorbs them into their structure, which is made up from fungus and algae. And then an interesting fact, the common lichen can survive for many millennia, even surviving until it is 3,000 years old. And then lastly, for our last organism, we have our fungi, and for this we did the tar spot fungi. So how does the organism reproduce, and what are its life cycle stages? It reproduces asexually and is what is known as an obligate pathogen, meaning that it needs a host to grow and reproduce. So as you can see on the screen, the tar spot fungi uses the leaf as its host. And then for its life cycle, it uses spores to spread, either single or in bunches, and the process for the fungus to show is 12 to 15 days. And then for its importance to humans, tar spot fungus has a negative impact on humans because it has contributed to the devastating destroyal of crops. Therefore, it's been a hardship on food production, especially corn crops. For corn crops, this first was spotted in Indiana in 2015, and it has grown from there, and it's been a very rapid and immense growth. And then how does the organism acquire its energy? It's a heterotrophic organism since it's an herbivore. So this means that it consumes its own nutrients to gain energy and itself produces any means to live. And then an interesting fact, tar spot fungi spreads extremely fast and it can produce thousands of spots on a single leaf or corn, which results in the severe loss of crops that is plaguing many farmers.
So now we have our experiences with the organisms, and our overall experience was that this activity was an engaging and educational experience. It allowed us to observe a wide variety of species all throughout Penn State. And though it required patience and close observation, the overall process in finding the organisms was relatively easy. Now for the easiest and hardest organisms to identify, the vertebrates and the flowering plants were the easiest to identify due to their large size and their abundance all over campus. And the fungi were the hardest to find since many of them look similar and they are more rare to find around the campus. And our advice for scientists in a new habitat is that document each observation carefully with pictures and notes in order to accurately identify each organism, and to visit the different habitats at different times of the day in order to maximize the species diversity.
Okay, and then moving on to part 2 for our suggestions for future research.
So we have our experiment, which we decided to do with the tar spot fungi. And our question is, does removing the infected maple leaf litter before bud break reduce the severity of tar spot on nearby maple trees? And our hypothesis is that if the tar spot survives winter in fallen infected leaves, then cleaning up those leaves before spring within 10 meters of a tree should result in fewer infected leaves and fewer spots per leaf if the leaves were on the ground. So for our actual experiment, we have the design, and the design was to randomly assign similar trees of the same species and size, and in this case the maple trees, to 2 groups. It can be around 10 trees, so around 5 trees per group. The treatment would be to remove all leaf litter by spring within a 10-mile radius, and then ban them and dispose of them. And the control would be no litter removal. And the standardization would be a minimum of 50 meters between the study trees, to avoid the trees near contaminated when possible, and to record distance to the nearest tree and the weekly rainfall. So the measurement would be from June to September. It would be sample 30 leaves randomly selected monthly and record the percentage of leaves infected and severity, so the mean number of tar spot per leaf or per percentage area covered. And then for the analysis, we would compare treatment versus control using the test for incidence and severity and report the effect size. The trees with litter removal should show significantly lower tar spot incidence and severity.
And then for our scientific paper, this is a figure from a scientific paper that researched if overwintered leaves, once infected by tar spot fungi, could serve as a control against the infection due to their presence in the colder weather. Moreover, the study explored isolation from the fungus to see if this reduced germination of the infection. And then this relates to our experiment since we sought to explore if removal of infected leaves, so the isolation, would result in leaves being infected in the springtime. And then the figure shown above demonstrates that the isolated organisms listed on the left did in fact serve as germination controls and therefore reduce the infection.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.